So our next session is entitled Perspective from the Ukraine, Building Global Solidarity and Reducing Fossil Fuel Dependency. Our moderator is Larry Shapiro. Larry is the founder of IEEFA, our immediate past president, and a member of our board of directors. He's also the Associate Director for Program Development at the Rockefeller Family Fund, where he also launched the Funders Collaborative on Oil and Gas. I'm going to turn this over to Larry to introduce our speaker.
So I'm really glad to have the opportunity to introduce Svitlana Romanko. Just before I do that, though, I want to say a few words about Donald Ross. Tom Sanzillo mentioned yesterday that Donald died earlier this year. Donald, on behalf of the Tortuga Foundation, was one of IEEFA's first funders and was one of IEEFA's most consistent funders. He loved coming to this conference. He especially loved getting his continuing legal education credit from this conference, which we no longer get. But just about everything good that has happened in this country on climate and energy issues over the past several decades had Donald's fingerprints on it one way or another. He was an original thinker and an unconventional thinker, and was a huge influence on me and a huge inspiration for me. But now I'm really proud to have been given the chance to introduce another inspiration, I think, for me and for all of us. Svitlana Romanko is a real climate hero. Svitlana is a founder and director of Razom We Stand, an international organization based in Ukraine, established to support the Stand with Ukraine campaign to ban all fossil fuels from Russia and end fossil-fueled war and drive a clean energy revolution in Ukraine and throughout the world. A National University professor and international expert on environmental and climate law in the past, she became a grassroots climate justice activist a decade ago, fighting against shale gas, or as we now say, shale methane gas, and against Chevron. When the Russian war against Ukraine started, Svitlana organized over 850 organizations from 60 countries around the world to support a global rapid response campaign for a full trade and financial embargo on Russian fossil fuels and a renewable energy transition for peace and for freedom from petro-dictators. She's been a leading voice of sanity, suggesting that it's a terrible idea to develop billions and billions of dollars worth of methane infrastructure that will last decades in order to deal with a short-term emergency in Europe. And then one more thing. My grandmother came to America in 1914 after spending her childhood in a city that is now in Ukraine and is now called Ivano-Frankivsk. In 1914, it was in Austria-Hungary, and although my grandmother always referred to it as Poland, it was at that time in Austria-Hungary. The Yiddish name for the city, which is how I always heard it referred to, was Stanislav. I've been told it's a beautiful city. I mentioned this to Svitlana when we met via email the other day, and it turns out Svitlana lives in Ivano-Frankivsk, and she has invited me to visit after Ukraine wins the war with Russia. I accepted, and I want to make the suggestion right now that once the war is over, we make Ivano-Frankivsk the greenest city in the world, make Ukraine the greenest country in the world, and hold the next IEEFA conference there so we can all celebrate with Svitlana. So Svitlana Romanko.
So good evening, good people, and thank you so much for just rising up as you always do, because I know that this audience, these people here, are prominent campaigners, are philanthropists, are decision makers, are people of every kind with different backgrounds who really make a change and make this world a better place. That's why I am especially pleased and delighted today to talk to you. And as my favorite rock group says, sometimes in their famous song, Metallica, they say, what's behind the door? Should I open it for you? And I am here today to open some doors for you to my country, to see what is happening in my country, and to welcome you to combine our worlds both together. The world which we are living is the only one we have. And for that purpose, and thank you so much, Larry, for the introduction, because it was really best introduction I had in life. And I am catching the words that you said the last, and we are inviting everyone when we win and when we defeat the Putin and Russia to join us in our beautiful country, in my unique homeland, which is always in my heart and with me here and always. And just to bring a bit of reality, because it's truly, really emotional for me. I'm a human, we all are humans, we have families, we have our lovely ones. We have those whom we every day to say bye, risking not to see them again, as I do for my husband, because I'm not sure that he will survive defending our country at the battlefield. As I'm saying to my children when they go to school, and these schools in Ukraine are totally out of basements and a basic infrastructure to keep our children safe, but they need to get some education and chances to stay and continue what we started for them. And every day it's kind of unusual since the first day, and sometimes I really want to wake up and just see that no, this war is not happening. It's not true what we see the 8 months already, but that is true. And the other conflicts in other parts of the world are echoing what is happening in my country. And if we won't end it right now, it won't be the last war on the planet. And thinking mostly of the common good, because I'm a justice activist, and my pivot to struggle we all do, and to fight we all do, is the justice. It's a thirst for justice for everyone, for my people who are being tortured and killed and violated and raped and just incredibly abused in many horrible ways. But only the largest country in the world that has oil and gas reserves, and is a third country on coal, we always, of course, do remember that. And how did this happen, that my beautiful country and my city in particular, there is no safe city in Ukraine right now, my city in the western part, but we've been able to see the missiles just stroking near our balcony, and just a little over our heads, maybe 30 meters or so. And when I'm calling my father to ask, how are you doing? Because my father is quite a senior, and my mother too, but they still run some as I believe here, some important activities to help the country, and they volunteer as do they can. And he says, hey darling, I'm okay. I just saw the missile just striking over my head, but I am okay. And there are much more fathers and mothers who lost their children in Ukraine, and there are much more children who never will say hello to their fathers and mothers again and never hug them. And for me, as for a mother and activist, that's the thing I think is essential, is critical, because none of the economy, especially the economy that is based on fossil fuels, is not worth every single human life that we lost. And I would like to say that we will work with our comrades and with allies, with all of you, because now, speaking to you, I am inviting everyone to that fight, because we need truly everyone. And I know that many of you are doing what you can, and many of you are already in since the war started. And I am so grateful to everyone. And there are more people behind me. With Razum we stand, with Together we stand. Together, it's Razum in Ukrainian, in the climate movement, and from those organizations who supported us from the very beginning. And we will seek out and find everyone who committed or just being connected to commitment of war crimes against Ukraine, and we will hold them accountable. All politicians, all financiers, all power brokers, everyone, literally everyone. And I'm here in the financial heart of the big country with developed economy. We said progressive and democratic people with the heart where the activism was born in general. And here, I'm asking you for solidarity in the fight against financial institutions and fossil fuel industry. Just speaking a bit more about the fossil fuel industry, because this fossil fuel industry, whom we call big oil, these financial institutions, who still silently fund in many hands Putin's war crimes, they are still abet and aided Putin to get this power and to run this war of aggression against us. And so far we act together, so far we will hold them all accountable. So sooner we will be able to end this war in Ukraine and start a bright new future for everyone. Because for me, renewable energy, and for my organization that I established not far ago, but our staff is currently working, being in Kyiv, being in Lviv, being also in Ivano-Frankivsk, and they are run out of electricity because thousands of people in my country with 30% destroyed energy infrastructure have no access to electricity supply, to heating in their houses, and to even food, to cooking food, to basic human rights. Who are we after we won't be able to abandon the fossil fuel addiction that avoids us of just getting our basic human rights, including the freedom of speech? This is very important. And I think the last, what I would like to say here, and to you, there are many things I want to say, but while we are alive, while I am alive, because it can be, we Ukrainians used that every day could be your last day, so don't plan too much ahead and don't think of many days ahead, but still, we would like to keep fighting and to end the fossil fuel addiction, global fossil fuel addiction that still feeds Russian and Putin's war machine. And again, we would like also just for that end the fossil fuel profiteering on this war, because there was a bunch of propaganda from fossil fuel industry saying and piece-washing the fact that they are in fact helping Ukraine to stop using Russian gas across Europe and everywhere, but it's not true. We know that it's not true, and fossil fuels are the root cause of the problem, and dependency on them feeds the war in our country and conflicts in many countries of the world. And just saying so, I ask everyone, please stand with Ukraine and let us not to be tired of the war, because the war, believe me, is the terrible thing which you never would like to see yourselves. And actually, we have unique chance and decisive moment in our history when we not only can end climate crisis and fossil fuel addiction, but also we can end fascism, which is even more important because it's rising up, you see. And if we let one side of the world win and they combine efforts with China, and then they will go back to Europe and to the US. These even opportunities should be stopped at the very beginning. And this genocide that has been committed towards Ukrainians, I believe, will be hardly punished and appropriately punished. And fossil fuel industry, of course, must pay for that. Not just being spending long days profiting on the war with enormous profits and prices, which are insane, because we're still awaiting what will they announce after the third quarter, what profits. And we just recently filed a case against Total, and we would aim to create a precedent to holding accountable big oil and gas and coal corporations and make them pay for the destruction they cause. Not just starting from Ukraine, yes, but to every other community in every other part of the world. And here I'm sending you also some greetings from my team who is in Ukraine, from Razum We Stand, and it's an organization that we started just recently, and we aim to end fossil fuel addiction and conflicts and climate chaos and drive the clean energy revolution in Ukraine and globally. And tomorrow at 9 a.m. I will be hosting a session about the greener Ukraine. If we do have even some opportunities to rebuild Ukraine, rebuild in green, and I would just anticipate that tomorrow we want and say yes. We truly believe that the renewable energy is the energy of peace and freedom, and we have a plan of how to sparkle a global momentum, starting from Ukraine, what we have. Even in this very terrible situation, we still running the climate movement in the country consists of a network and 45 organizations, and we highly pressure the policy decision makers and politicians inside and outside of Ukraine. Recently in Brussels, next week in Berlin, we will send them a message, and I am talking personally to MPs in the EU Parliament, EU Council, and the most recently, what we propose, the oil price cap, we just highly pressured before Brussels event, and it has been included at the ministerial meeting into the 8th sanction of package. But of course, this political advocacy is not going easy, and that's why we need truly everyone, please be on our side, because it's a good side to be. And thank you so much. And if you have any questions, I'm very inspired by you and by you listening so carefully. And just please let's act together, otherwise it will be too late. Thank you. Yes, I can hear you. Yes, Clara. Yes, thank you so much, Clara, for your question. Yes, we do have a plan, and recently I co-authored research with Ukrainian organizations about the 3 scenarios of how Ukraine could be potentially rebuilt in green. And of course, my part was the most ambitious scenario, with the rebuilding of Ukraine with zero emissions, with the green investments, which we still lack, so desperately lack in the world. But I so much hope that our joint pressure on financial asset holders and institutions will help to improve that, including our activities on Global Financial Alliance on Net Zero, because it's a high time to remind them as well, just that you owe us some money, and this money are trillions, and we need to do it before COP27 as well. But in Ukraine specifically, what we would like to see, of course, it's not easy now inside of Ukraine just to advocate for any just high ambitious goals, because 40% of buildings have been destroyed, and there are some cities that are 90% destroyed. That's a disaster, and people are lacking too much access to housing and to the homes, and actually electricity as well. But even in these tough circumstances, being in the front line, we don't agree. We are not buying oil and gas money being invested into our country to rebuild. For us, it makes difference. We are another generation. We don't accept this money, and some of us actually are living where they can, and we host the families as well. When there was internally displaced people, we did all we can just to accommodate all of us. So I believe we can overcome this. And energy transition goals are extremely important, because 30%, as I said, critical energy infrastructure is being destroyed, not just recently, starting from 10th of October with Iranian bomb drones, which we see. And it's unacceptable what is happening with even this avoiding of sanctions that have been imposed on Iran as well. They still can't supply these horrible weapons that have become weapons of mass destruction. So we need to make sure that we have all agreements in place, but not only agreements, as for example, Fossil Fuel Non-Proliferation Treaty and other agreements that will help us to stop funding harmful explorations, but also that we have reliable energy transitions plan. And here our role is demand from European Union, not only extension, the European Green Deal goals onto us, onto Ukraine as well in a full scale, because we are not a secondary country. We are not a country that will just accept any leftovers from the European climate policies. They owe us something, I would say. They owe us dependency and addiction for Putin's gas that helped to raise the economy. For that purpose, we also are thinking about energy efficiency, that one of the most important ways just to get where we want to be with energy saving. And we think, of course, without transport decarbonization, we won't be able to achieve, because we all know 80% of emissions in the cities are made of transport emissions. So these are critical and important for us. And it's not, of course, it won't happen overnight. But we are quite optimistic that we can pave the way to appropriate green energy transition. And I will tell you even more, the last sentence, what we would like to do. We would like to be brave enough and resilient enough and remarkable, not only at the battlefield, as our heroic army is doing, but also in escalating and driving the clean energy transition and pushing Europe towards more ambitious goals, and pushing US being the global leader of green energy transition and, of course, equipment and all of that we still desperately need. And, of course, the last thing, which is truly important, that we can't see, I personally can't see doubling down on fossil fuel production and just revisiting forgotten fields as offshores, drillings, and building new pipelines. And the part of our work is also to communicate, as for example in Canada, with the Deputy Prime Minister, who is also Ukrainian, just to stop LNG terminals there. And in the US, I believe we worked some strategically to stop some pipelines and exploration, because that's the reality we share, and the sooner we end the fossil fuels in the US or in the EU, in Ukraine, the sooner we can all live in peace. Thank you.